Hello again. In our effort to provide continual education and assistance to our contractor companies, we'd like to welcome you to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's, or more commonly known as OSHA, record-keeping video tutorial. The purpose of this video is to explain the reasoning, requirements, and process to assist you in complying with OSHA's record-keeping requirements for work-related injuries and illnesses as they relate to your company. This video focuses on the types of record-keeping cases contractors typically encounter. Additional resources are reviewed at the end of the video, which may be helpful in addressing any cases with special considerations. During this video, we will discuss the need for record-keeping, review general information and terminology, complete a step-by-step exercise on how to fill in an OSHA 300 log and 300A form, review some common errors found when submitting OSHA forms, and cover some additional resources available to your company. Okay, let's start by discussing why keeping injury and illness records is so important. The first reason involves compliance with OSHA's record-keeping standard 29 CFR 1904. OSHA mandates that employers with more than 10 employees have a legal obligation to record work-related injuries and illnesses using specific OSHA forms to satisfy a client requirement. While it may not be a legal requirement for you to maintain OSHA forms, your clients in ISNet world might request that you track injuries and illnesses and submit the appropriate record-keeping documents. And by doing so, good record-keeping will help you provide needed data to your clients promptly and efficiently. The next reason, trending and performance monitoring, can help your company identify common trends and sources of injury so that you can turn a lagging or after-the-fact indicator into a leading proactive indicator by taking action to prevent those same types of incidents and injuries from occurring in the future. Once your company starts monitoring trends and performance, such as the types of injuries incurred and your total recordable incident rate, you can then begin benchmarking. Benchmarking allows you to measure your company's performance against your industry peers. This will help you tell if the safety programs you've implemented are having a positive effect on your company and employees. And finally, there's communication. Record-keeping and reporting requirements also need to be communicated throughout your company. There is a posting requirement from OSHA mandating that employers with greater than 10 employees display their OSHA 300-day work-related injury and illnesses summary form in the workplace every year from February 1 to April 30th. Now that we've discussed the importance of record-keeping, let's go over some general information and terminology. To start off, the OSHA 300 log and 300-day summary forms should only be used to record injuries and illnesses that are work-related and meet recording criteria, which means that for each injury and illness that occurs, you will need to determine whether it meets the definition of work-related. The OSHA standard states that an injury or illness is considered work-related if an event or exposure occurred in the work environment and either caused or contributed to the resulting condition or significantly aggravated a pre-existing injury or illness. Once you have determined if the injury or illness is work-related, you will then need to determine whether it meets OSHA's specific recording criteria. Injuries and illnesses should be recorded if they result in any of the following four classifications. They are 1. Death of an employee. 2. Days away from work, which results when an injury or illness to an employee requires them to be absent from work for at least 1 day after the day of the injury. 3. When the injury or illness requires a job transfer or restriction of duties for the employee, which simply means that an employee is unable to perform one or more of their routine job functions for at least 1 day. It is important to again note that the day the injury occurred would not be counted as a day away from work or a day of job transfer or restriction. This is due to the fact that OSHA wants to ensure companies are not penalized while injured employees receive proper medical attention and the potential injury or illness is investigated. The last type of recordable injury or illness is classified as 4. Other recordable cases. These are cases that do not result in a death, days away from work, or require either a job transfer or restriction of duties. However, they still need to be recorded if they involve medical treatment beyond first aid, loss of consciousness, hypodermic needle sticks, loss of hearing, or any other results listed under the OSHA Record-Keeping Standard 29 CFR 1904.7. The OSHA Record-Keeping Standard lists very specific criteria for what would be considered medical treatment beyond first aid, and a number of other scenarios that would make an incident recordable. Now that you've identified your recordable incidents, you will need to record them properly on the OSHA 300 log and 300A summary forms for the calendar year in which they occurred. To help you accomplish this, we will take you through a step-by-step process of completing the required OSHA forms. Let's begin this process by starting in the upper right-hand corner of the 300 log form and filling in the effective year, which is the year's incidents you are recording on this form, the establishment name and the city and state. Next, you should fill in the details for each recordable incident that occurred that year. It's important to note that the OSHA record-keeping standard mandates that cases be recorded on the log within 7 calendar days after receiving information about the case. Please remember that if you did not have any recordable incidents for that year, you will still need to fill in zeros across the bottom row of columns G through L and 1 through 6. If your company did experience a recordable injury or illness, you will need to start by completing the basic information in columns A through F. Start on the far left by including the incident number in numerical order, starting with the number 1. Next, you will need to enter the injured employee's name, his or her job title, the date of the injury or onset of the illness, as well as the location where the event occurred within the worksite. You will also need to add a brief description of the injury or illness, along with the affected body part and object or substance that directly injured or made the person ill. If needed, you may use more than one line per incident. It is also important to note that if you are sharing your 300 log with other companies and/or clients, you will need to remove or hide the listed employees' names for privacy purposes. After you have filled in the basic information about the case, you must classify it by checking one box only in columns G through J. It is again important to note that each case should be classified only once, according to the most severe result of the incident, with death being the most severe and other recordable case being the least severe. The next section you will need to complete are columns K and/or L, if the injury or illness is resulted in days away from work and/or job transfer or restriction duty days. Here is where you will need to indicate the number of days for either or both that resulted from the incident. If the incident resulted in both days away from work and job transfer or restriction days, you would indicate the number of days for each, but would only classify that case as a days away from work case, as it is the most severe. And per OSHA, you should stop counting the days of restricted work activity or days away from work once the total of either or the combination of both reaches 180 days. Once you have completed the previously mentioned sections of the 300 log, you will then need to indicate the type of injury or illness in columns 1 through 6 on the right side of the form. This information, although required, is also helpful to you as an employer to track and trend your company's incidents and injuries over the years to help prevent them in the future. After entering the information for all recordable incidents, you will need to complete the page totals at the bottom for each column. Once that's done, congratulations, you've completed the 300 log. At the end of the calendar year, you will need to start completing the 300A summary form by entering the totals for each type of recordable case from the corresponding spaces on the 300 log. For instance, the combined total from column G on each page of the 300 log should be entered on the corresponding space G on the 300A form. It is important that these documents match each other for consistency. Next, you will again need to fill out all the information on the right side of the form, starting with the Establishment Information section, which includes the effective year in the upper right-hand corner, followed with the establishment name, street, city, state, and your company's North American Industry Classification System, NAICS code. Your NAICS code indicates the type of work you perform and classifies your company within its associated industry. You can search and select the most appropriate NAICS code for your company by visiting an NAICS code search website, the majority of which are free of charge. After that, you will need to complete the Employment Information section, indicating your company's average number of employees and total hours worked for that effective year. The average number of employees must be a whole number, rounded up for any partial employees. It's also important to note that the average number of employees and total hours worked should include both office and field employees and their work hours. Once completed, the 300A should be signed and dated by a company executive as a certification of the information provided. The executive should also provide his or her title and a contact phone number. Now that we have covered the basics of the record-keeping process, let's address a few common errors that are seen in completing and submitting these forms. The first common error is incomplete establishment information, including company name and address. The information is important for identifying your company and the location for which the incident reports are associated. The next common error is having an incorrect or blank effective year. Companies must ensure that the correct year for which the OSHA injury and illness forms represent is indicated in the top right-hand corner of the forms. This is followed by double classification of incidents. Remember, injuries and illnesses should only be classified once, based on the most severe outcome of the incident. Another common error found is no executive signature. Although seemingly easy, yet often forgotten, the signature from a company executive is a key part of the process, as it is required to ensure the credibility of the records. And finally, your OSHA 300 log and 300A form totals don't match. Also very common. When copying totals from one form to another, these injury and illness forms must correlate or match exactly to be accepted. Take the time to double and even triple check your work to ensure it is correct. By avoiding these 5 common errors, your compliance with both OSHA and your client's expectations to meet this record-keeping requirement will be greatly increased. Okay, we've identified who's required to record injuries and illnesses, discussed the different classifications each incident may fall under, and then went through the step-by-step process of completing the OSHA 300 log and 300A summary form. We've also reviewed some general information and common errors associated with record keeping. However, after this, you may still need some extra assistance. If this is the case, you're in luck. ISNet World contains a tool for contractors called SmartLog, which was developed to make the process of keeping injury and illness records simpler by providing contractors an online step-by-step process for record keeping. SmartLog has a decision tree built into it that asks the user questions about each incident, clarifying the classification process. And based on your responses to those questions, SmartLog completes the OSHA 300 log and 300A summary forms. These completed forms are then available for your company to print out and sign. And they also meet OSHA criteria. These forms can also be submitted into your ISNet World if your client or clients are requesting them. And the best thing of all is that there is no additional fee to use SmartLog, as ISN includes SmartLog as part of your ISNet World subscription, as a value-added benefit for your contractors. Also, if your company would like additional information or guidance regarding the record-keeping process from another source, you can always reference any of the following resources. 1. OSHA's 29 CFR 1904, the actual OSHA record-keeping standard, which lists all the legal requirements related to record-keeping. 2. Your local OSHA office, which you may call with any particular record-keeping question. 3. Your company's workers' compensation or insurance carrier, who are more than willing to provide assistance to your company. Or if you need additional specific guidance on how to fill those forms out, you can look at 4 record-keeping instructions located on the 300 log and 300-day summary forms. Thank you again for taking the time to view this video. We hope you found it beneficial in complying with the injury and illness record-keeping requirements set by OSHA and possibly your clients.